Hello, hello. How do you do, everybody? Nice to see you, folks. My name is Dustin Cormier, and we are watching How to Rock Astrology. I have a feeling that my audio might be a little bit funky right now. If anybody could let me know if my audio sounds doubled up, that would be of use at this present time. Today, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, we are going to be discussing the one and only Pushya Nakshatra. And Pushya is heralded by the great arbiter of the sages of the Vedas, known as Brihaspati. Welcome, 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 welcome. Thanks, everybody, for your patience in the wait. I've been dealing with stuff with my computer like I always have been. So my computer's probably going to do some clicks and pops and stops. We're just going to have to rock and roll and deal with that. But thankfully, as before, we should be able to go through this. We might get some occasional pops and stops, but it should still be able to keep going, and we're going to rock and roll. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. Happy Thursday for everybody who's here live with me. And for everybody watching at home, happy whatever day it is for you. This is a continuation of our nakshatra series. We've been doing all of the 27 nakshatras in this series. Of course, the nakshatras are something quite different from the rashis or the signs. I've recently been watching some videos of Ernst, Wilhelm's, and Ernst has made a fascinating point to me that the nakshatras are, in the old Vedic texts, the nakshatras were considered one of the lights. Basically, in those old days, what it was said, how Parashara conveyed the sky, is he said, when you look out at the sky, there are lights that are moving and there are lights that are not moving. The lights that are not moving are the nakshatras, and the lights that are moving are the planets. This is not the same as the signs. The signs are a breakdown of the 360-degree wheel of space that starts where the spring, in the northern hemisphere, the spring equinox is, where the sun is during March 31st. That's the classic tropical definition of the zodiac. So the signs have nothing to do with the stars. The signs aren't alive. They are the unconscious limbs of Vishnu. The nakshatras are conveyed, however, as this living thing. In today's time, it means something significant that Pushya exists where it does, somewhere around the end of Cancer and the beginning of Leo. So this has been giving me a different insight into what the nakshatras are all about. They're this living thing, just like the planets are. And I'm endeavoring to kind of talk about them as such. Now, today we're going to be talking about the nakshatra Pushya. Pushya is the nakshatra ruled by Brihaspati, who, again, as I said, conveys the Vedic idea of the sages. And as we move along, we're going to see how the sages in the Vedas are like the priests of the deities, of the adityas, of the gods. They are really their own class of consciousness. And that's why when we look at the classical groupings of Pushya in the nakshatras, we see Brihaspati is his own grouping. There's the Adityas, there's the Rudras, and there's the Vasus. Now I'm going to bring this up again as we go along, but essentially there are certain nakshatras that are their own grouping unto themselves. and brihaspati is one of them. We're going to talk about that as we go along. And I am excited to. Now, as I said, folks, I'm hoping that anybody watching can let me know if my audio is doubled up, or if it sounds like it's in a weird echo, because I can't really tell that on my end, unfortunately. It's just part of the nature of the setup that I'm trying to move through. So if you hear my vocal being a little bit wacky, please let me know if and when you can. For now, I think that we're just going to keep moving forward and get started here. So, of course, in my practice, I use 12 tropical signs overlaid on the 27 nakshatras. I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer, and I use the tropical measurements of the signs. I'm just going to try and see if I can put my headphone jack in here. Check, 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 check. Yeah, it sounds like I'm okay. So as a tropical Vedic astrologer, I use 12 rashis that are tropical overlaid on the 27 starry nakshatras. You can check out my sidereal and tropical debate videos for more on that sidereal tropical situation. This is an example of one that I did that goes into some good detail. Now, in all these videos, I've been conveying this little story. In the story, we have this ego demon who has grown too wary, too strong, has lost its connection to the divine. And so it takes up too much space. And the gods are worried that this ego demon is ruining reality. Of course, this is just like all of us. This is just like today's time. When anybody gets out of touch with the divine, they get out of touch with astrology. They get out of touch with the stars, the planets, the nakshatras, and the divine within them. So Vishnu goes to trick this ego demon. And Vishnu says, hey, I was just wondering if you could grant me a boon. And Vishnu comes in the form of a midget, an atom, the smallest amount of space possible. So the ego, seeing this small atom, this small bit of matter that Vishnu is, says, oh, you are so small. What do you want from me? And Vishnu says, I'd like a boon, please. I was wondering if I could own 3 foot paces, 3 steps of land. And the ego says, you're so small, you won't take up any space at all. Of course, Vishnu is all space. So Vishnu says, okay, I'm going to take my 3 steps. With the first step, I'm going to take swaha. My second step, I'm going to take bhuva rather. And then with my third step, I'm going to take bhu. This is the nakshatras, this is the zodiac, and then this is the houses, the horizon, etc. There's many ways of telling this story. But this is one of the ways that we can understand it, is that the nakshatras are different from the rashis. So that's why in this series, I want to convey the pure essence and the nature of the nakshatras as they are without any sign or rashi associations. We're trying to see the pure nature of the nakshatras without their connection to the signs. You've seen this on all of my videos, and I should say now too, if anybody's interested, you can check out, I've made a video at the beginning of this series. It's the 27 Nakshatra series introduction or explained. And it's describing the guts of what's happening in this series, if you would be interested in that. And one of the main things that we're doing in this series is trying to uncover the most authentic and undistorted literature we have available on the nakshatras. And according to everyone in our tropical Vedic astrology circle, the best undistorted literature we have comes from an ancient text known as the Taitirriya Brahmana. This is a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda. It's considered to be a continuation of the Krishna Yajurveda. It's a Brahmana, so it's not written in the same era as the Vedas, but it is considered to be the closest thing to the Vedic consciousness speaking to astrology. Because really, the natal horoscope of the zodiac is something that happened like 500 BC to 0 AD. But the nakshatras are like much older. They're like 3,000, 4,000 years old. They were conveyed in the Krishna Yajurveda, which is probably like 2000 BC to 1000 BC. And even those brahmanas were around this era, probably 1000 BC, something like that. So this is an undistorted literature talking about the nakshatras from a truly Vedic place. This is how Vic Dicara kind of conveys it in his world, as well as Ernst Wilhelm. Now, why is it that we're going through this particular book? Well, the nature of, there's a distortion that has happened, which the nakshatras, when we hear about the nakshatras, each one of them has these characteristics. We hear about them. They have symbolism. They have all these things associated with it. But none of this comes from authentic Vedic literature. It's after the fact. And many people, because of the sidereal tropical debate, many people in the sidereal tradition have assumed that the nature of the signs is married to the nakshatras, because this part of the astrology world of Vedic astrology has assumed anciently that the stars convey the signs. The stars are the rashis, the signs. We tropical people believe that the point of Aries moves in the background of the stars. So the signs are not married to the stars, which means much of what we've heard about the nakshatras, like Pushya, for example. Pushya is anciently considered to be in Cancer, I believe, and it has the character of Cancer. Nowadays, we convey it as being at the end of Cancer and really blend it in with Leo, for the most part. So, whenever we hear about the nakshatras, we have to discern whether the person talking about the nakshatras is assuming that the character of the signs are blended with the nakshatra, because the nakshatra has an essence that has nothing to do with the signs. And this is what we're doing in this series. So there's an incorrect zodiac association with the nakshatras. As well, you can check out the intro to this series for more on this. But there's also the Vimshottari Lord. This is the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in that nakshatra. So the example I always give is, let's say, hello, Mary, nice to see you. The example I always give is if there's a planet in Kritika. When the moon is in Kritika natally, the person's first Mahadasha that they're born when they're 0 years old, when the moon is in Kritika, you experience the sun Mahadasha first. So people have assumed that the nature of Kritika has something to do with the sun. But Vimshottari and the dashas are a system that was created with natal horoscope astrology, which is again like 500 BC, 0 AD, way after the nakshatras were conceived. So there's some nature of the nakshatras that has nothing to do with the Vimshottari lords, and that's part of what we're talking about in this series too. Again, you can check out the intro to this series for more on that. Now, here is an example of two different gentlemen who really have two different ways of astronomically plotting the nakshatras. This is a frustrating reality in today's time because we tropical astrologers are still figuring out the roots of how these nakshatras are conveyed astronomically. We can see that there is two different ways of understanding where they are in the tropical zodiac. Now, it's an interesting thing. I almost see it as Vic Dicara has a perfect circle, whereas Ernst's depiction of the nakshatras is more like an oval. And here's what I mean. When you look, for example, at Kritika, Kritika is 20 degrees of Taurus in Vic's understanding. Now, Ernst is very close to this with Kritika. Kritika is at 19 degrees Taurus. But halfway through this plot, we see their Ayanamshas become very different. For Vic, Magha is at 24 degrees Leo. And for Ernst, Magha starts at 16 degrees Leo. So as we get closer to around Magha, there's the gap between these two gentlemen's understanding of the placement of the nakshatras in the tropical zodiac becomes very skewed by about 8 degrees. That's, in my understanding, the biggest gap I've found. Now, Pushya in Vic Dicara's system is at about 27 degrees of Cancer. Pushya in Ernst's system is at about 21 degrees of Cancer. This means that if you have a planet falling at, let's say, 24 degrees of Cancer, it could be Punarvasu or it could be Pushya. It's up to astrologers of today's time to research, to explore these, explore your parents, your friends, especially look for the moon in these places. Get the data on it. We need to do some statistical research to find out where exactly Pushya actually starts, because this is part of what's happening in the modern age of tropical astrologers trying to convey what is the true Ayanamsha, what is the true understanding of the placement of these nakshatras. So unfortunately, if you have a planet on this cusp area, you've got to join the rest of us in being not entirely sure. Vic Dicara makes a great point where if you have a planet and it's in the blurred zone where you can't tell exactly what nakshatra it is, and you're doing a reading for them, don't just assume it's in that nakshatra. Just ignore the nakshatra reality of that planet, essentially. Unless you are doing research, then explore it. But if you have somebody's life in your hands and your advice for their life depends on an interpretation, and you just assume, well, I'm just going to lean into it and assume that this moon at 24 degrees of Cancer is Pushya, you could be wrong, and you could be messing with a person's life and destiny and ruining what astrology is supposed to be, which is as an exact science as we can possibly wrangle at our current level of understanding. So be very careful with that. If this is your own sign, you've got nothing. You've got to just explore it. Which one feels more connected to you? Are you Pushya or are you Punarvasu if your moon is at 24 degrees of Cancer? Listen to both, understand both, and explore both and see what resonates with you, and then tell the rest of the world about it, because that's the research we all need to be doing right now. Hello, Teresa. Nice to see you, my dear. Now, that is that. So now let's look at the 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. These qualities are not given directly in the Taitirriya Brahmana. They may have been culled by cultural intuitions and commentaries based on the 2 distortion points we've already mentioned, which is that there could be, these characteristics could be coming from the signs, and they could be coming from the Vimshotri Lord. Now, I'm bringing them up here because, again, I'm a researcher who wants to explore them. We're going to explore the dirty research, and then we're going to clarify it through the clean research by looking at the Taitirriya Brahmana. These are 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. Ernst Wilhelm is given particular emphasis to the kingdom, whether it's a jiva, mula, or what's the other one? Dhatu, which is mineral. We've got the activity, active, passive, balanced. We've got the 7 qualities of the nakshatras that are classically given. The sexual yoni animal, it's used in lunar compatibility and traditional Indian marriage assessment. And then the kingdom. In the case of Pushya, we have the god of Pushya, which is brihaspati. The meaning of brihaspati in some ways means a flower, whether it's probably Pushya, actually. Brihaspati has its own meaning, as we're going to see. But Pushya is typically regarded as being a flower, a flowering of sorts. And part of the reason for this is because we're going to see as we go along that Pushya comes right after Punarvasu. And if you listen to our previous class, Punarvasu Nakshatra is ruled by the great important goddess Aditi. Aditi is the perennial, eternal goddess. It is the Mahashakti, it is Divine Mother. And it is from the Divine Mother, at a material and spiritual sense, that all goodness comes. Now, Punarvasu is the space of the Divine Mother, and Punarvasu people are dealing with the eternal cyclicality of making freshness out of the old. That is their dharma. Here with Brihaspati, once there is this recognition that things can be fresh, that there is an eternal freshening of Punarvasu. You know, there is a numerology in the nakshatras, and it has a reflection. Pushya is like the second house from Punarvasu. It doesn't have the same correlation as the second house, because the second house in the houses is its own thing. The second house is opposite the 8th. The second house is trine from the 6th and the 10th. It's got a numerical resonance that's different for the nakshatras. So we have to keep that in mind. But the number 2 is still the second. It's still an offspring. It's still a producing of the previous nakshatra. So Pushya is the second from Punarvasu. Pushya is a flower that is a blooming of wisdom that comes from a connection to the Aditi, the eternal wisdom that the previous nakshatra represents. We're going to talk about that as we go along as well. Pushya is considered all of these light and swift nakshatras. These are all considered light, Lagu and Kshipra. When we say light, we don't mean light as in the opposite of dark. We mean it as in the opposite of heavy. Light-hearted, they can move around. They're all passive. You know, there's active, passive, and balanced. These are one of the guys that are passive, that don't get too wrapped up in the world. And of these nakshatras, the Pushya is the particular one that resonates with the Mula, the plant kingdom. It's a passive plant, a flower, that is slowly flowering into its own wisdom that it can share with the world. And it doesn't get too wrapped up and entangled in the world like other nakshatras do, because it's passive. And it is the male sheep. That is what Pushya is all about. There's lots of symbolism related to the udder that we're going to talk about as well. So again, everything we've said just now with these characteristics, we have to consider that it's coming from extraneous literature after the Taitirriya Brahmana. So some of that could be misinterpolated, misconstrued. But when you read, for example, Vic Dicara mentions a lot of these in positive regard as being not disconnected, not entirely wrong. That's why, again, as today's people, as researchers, we have to take the dirty research and clarify it with the clean research that has come before it, the more primary authoritative literature. That's part of what we're doing in this series. So now we've talked about the characteristics of Pushya. Let's start to get to the goods. Let's start to explore what Pushya is in the Taitirriya Brahmana. Now, you guys, if you've been watching my series, you've probably already seen this slide. We have the true nakshatra name in the top left, and then we have the Nakshatra Sutra. The Nakshatra Sutra is what is given in the Taittiriya Brahmana. Now, let me just say that how sutras work. a sutra is like, a doctor has a thread, and it's this type of thread that can thread seared muscle, rended muscles that have been opened up by a cut. You use a sutra to wrap them up. Now, what we see is the line, the sutra, but it implies that there is a vast density of muscle, metaphorically speaking. There's a vast density of meaning, of enigmatic, cryptic meaning underlying the sutra. The sutra just pins it together. Now, how we know what is inside the sutra, this was in a time when the people who wrote these sutras wanted to be economical in how they conveyed their wisdom, because they wanted to memorize all of the nature of the 27 nakshatras. They wanted to memorize and understand it in a quick way. So they gave themselves this little shortcut in a sutra. And how they condense the information is with repetition. It's a musical thing that they do. There's like a repeating melody motif. And you can see how there's an embodied melody by the way that each sutra is structured in the same way every time. It's hard to explain, but it's like each word in the sutra is a slot. And there's the content of the word, but there's also the content of the slot that we have to be aware of, because there's an intermingling of the synaptic information in the word with the synaptic information of the slot. Those two blending together adds depth to the meaning of the sutra. Now I'm going to show you guys what I mean, just so you guys can see where I'm at here. This is the sutra structure of all of the sutras in the Taitirriya Brahmana. We see the first word is the deity, which rules the nakshatra in classical Vedic literature. So in this case, we have brihaspati. Of course, as we've said, brihaspati rules Pushya. Next, we have a name of the nakshatra. And we'll note that, again, because they wanted to squish as much information as they could into these sutras, the name of the nakshatra, sometimes they give an obscure name in order to give more information about that nakshatra. Pushya is no exception. Pushya is the name of this nakshatra, but the name given in the sutra is something different, which is Tishya, although they're very similar. You can kind of see there's a resonance there that's similar. It's Tishya is what's there. You can tell it's a h because there's a little dot under the H. Now, the third word in yellow is what we call the foundation from above. This is what is needed for the nakshatra to function properly. And Padastad is essentially saying the same thing. So Jhvatah is needed in order to produce Yajamana. The yellow word is the foundation above. That's what's needed. And then the blue word is the foundation below. This is what the nakshatra desires to produce from what it receives. And there's a funny trick that goes on with all these nakshatras where you need what is the foundation from above in order to produce what the foundation below is. The foundation below is what we want. So when most people see these sutras, they think, okay, well, obviously the word in yellow is bad, and the word in blue is good. So why don't I just focus on the word that's in blue? But if you do that, you're going to be missing out on this cyclical stability. There's these nakshatras almost have a Vishnu Lakshmi element to them, where if you were to find the true balance, you wouldn't just be looking for the results, the fruits of your action. You would be also just sitting in the dharma of the yellow word, of your action, and faithfully abide by the yellow word, giving it up to God, swaha. I will abide by what is needed for my nakshatra, having faith that God will give me the produced result in God's own time. Because that's all we're really entitled to, is our action. not the fruits of our action. Bhagavad Gita, hello. So keep that in mind as we're going to go through it. We need the yellow word in order to produce the blue word. This is our Pushya Nakshatra Sutra. Now, I always say, I'm not going to do this as good as Vic Dicara does because I don't study Sanskrit like Vic Dicara does, but I'm going to do my best. Brihaspati's Tishyaha Jufataha Parastad Yajamana Avastat Brihaspati's Tishyaha Jihvataha Parastad Yajamana Avastat. That is how the vocal would go. They would just go, they would say it once, and then move on to the next nakshatra. And because again, they wanted to memorize it. It's got a rhythm to it. So let's start to dive into what these Sanskrit terms mean. Now, in my studies, how I've been rolling with this sutra series is we've been studying from two different texts. One of them is the energies of the 27 lunar mansions. This is the Nakshatra Sutras from the Taitirriya Brahmana, written by Ernst Wilhelm. So Ernst Wilhelm translates them in a certain way. You can kind of see there's that God there at the front. This is a free PDF that is available for everybody because Ernst wants people to study the nakshatras so that we can all get into it and start exploring it and manifesting it and being a part of it. God bless him for making this freely available for everybody. As well, we are going to study a book known as the Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, by none other than our boy, Vic Dicara. This is really the gold. This is the guts. Vic Dicara has spent, in my opinion, much more time on the nakshatras than Ernst Wilhelm has. Ernst's translations are brassy because he just wants to get an almost abstraction of what we read in the Nakshatra Sutra. Vic makes it more applicable and practically relatable to the human experience. And in my opinion, both are important. That's why we go through both. Because Ernst also does a good job in his own way. So this is Ernst Wilhelm's translation of all these terms. Brihaspati means, brihaspates, as we read it here, it means of Brihaspati. Brihaspati literally means the Lord of abundance. It's the Lord of devotion and prayer. And it's related with Jupiter. How I would say this is that there's something called guru. Guru is not just like a teacher. What guru means is density. And there's this dense heaviness that weighs on the person, the reality of everybody experiencing wisdom. Wisdom is always there, and its heaviness is always impressing itself onto us. It's just not everybody feels, not everybody acts on it, not everybody can deal with it. Having a guru is a very specific dharma. It's a lucky dharma, but it's painful. It's painful to wield wisdom. But it's even more painful to not, if you understand it. It's painful to be healthy. It's painful not to drink beer. It's painful not to smoke weed all day. It's painful not to jerk off all day. It's painful to work. It's painful to have a narrow, consistent, self-care routine that keeps you stable. It's painful. But it's even more painful not to. And you'll only understand that once you accept what the guru is trying to push you through. And you'll only accept that if you have the dharma of doing so. Brihaspati is a word that means the Lord of devotion, the Lord of prayer, the Lord of abundance. And it is our connection to guru, our connection to wisdom of our superconscious that brings in this wisdom, that allows us to wield this heaviness. So the word Brihaspati is like an umbrella term that overtakes both guru and Jupiter and even wisdom and the sages. The sages are brihaspati in the Vedic literature. They are wisdom. All of the deities have brihaspati as their teacher because brihaspati is the natural, it's the doorway out of Punarvasu, which is the eternal recycling wisdom. So the word brihaspati is an umbrella term for guru and wisdom in that general sense. And Jupiter, that's what I was going to say. Guru, Jupiter, wisdom, all of these are heralded under the living essence of wisdom that we call brihaspati. Tishya means auspicious and fortunate, and of course, it's prosperity in a way too, but we're going to see how Vic Dicara describes it in a moment. So this is almost saying the auspiciousness of brihaspati, the auspiciousness of wisdom comes when we apply juhvataha, which will inevitably produce yajamana. So this is how Ernst describes it in his very rather bleached, I would say sterile, but he is doing it for a reason again, okay? So, brihaspati tishyaha, the wisdom, the auspiciousness, the fortune of wisdom, I should say, is juhvataha from above and yajamana from below. It is the tongue of Agni, a flame which licks the offerings from above. This is going to seem very esoteric until we get to Vic Dicara's translation. This is the esoteric, there's a ceremonial tinge to what is being expressed here. And as we get into the rest of our reading, we're going to see that this is very key to understanding what happens in the Vedic Yajna ceremony. The Vedic Yajna, it's Y-A-J-N with a little squiggle, A, Yajna. That's the Vedic Yajna, is the sacrifice ceremony. Anciently, the ceremony, the ritual of sacrifice, was something that the individual would put themselves through in order to give swaha the best of their essence, the best of their momentum and energy towards the intention of the sacrifice ritual. And the sacrifice ritual has all of the nakshatras embedded in it. There's 27 stones around the sacrificial ceremony. There's prayers given where a deity begins and a deity ends, and then within a deity, there's all the deities that have their place in this yajna ceremony. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. And when anybody experiences the yajna ceremony, what you're kind of doing is you're acknowledging the nature of the living gods that permeate all reality, accepting yourself as an endeavorer, as a worshiper, as one who is on the journey of sacrifice, of embodying what the sacrifice is. The sacrifice at some level is Agni. We are all life exists to make the spiritual potential be embodied as a sum which is greater than the parts of the material it takes to embody it. We are looking to be a sum greater than our parts. Our parts are only going to be a sum of energy greater than our parts if we purify them through Agni, through fire. It is the fire that purifies the material earth and condenses it into the wisdom of Guru, of Jupiter, of Brihaspati. It can be painful. It can be narrow, is probably a better word. Narrow as opposed to all the space that we think we ought to take as an ego. Like we said at the beginning, there's the ego that wants to be a specific thing. But Vishnu comes along and makes the ego realize that there is a narrow gate. There's a specific way that your karma needs to resolve itself and experience retribution. And it can only happen through self-realization. It can only happen through your specific karma. So you need to find a doorway to acknowledging the sacrifice that you need to make that will make the karma that you're living through worth more than the sum of its parts. And how you do that is through the fire ceremony, the yajna, the sacrifice. Now, Juhvataha is a tongue of Agni. You know, we say a fire has flames, tongues of flame, which the Vedic people, how they understand it, is the tongue of flame licks the offerings. And there's a beautiful metaphor here. When we say a tongue of flame, there is a reason why that has come through in our language. We could call it anything. Like, where does this tongue, where does that even come from? Well, what it comes from is that fire is the living embodiment of Agni, who is the mouth of the gods. It's Agni that transmits our intentions given in any sacrifice ceremony to the gods. Its tongues, it's the mouth of the offering. It eats the offering. Whenever you put your intentions into anything, you're putting it into Agni. And you say, I'm willing to burn. I'm willing to sacrifice what my ego thinks it wants in order to be aligned with the divine. And this is the sacrifice I want to make. So the fire eats it. The fire eats your intention and then transmits it through the universe. Now, the reason why it's super cool and psychedelic is because the tongue is our vessel of speech, prayer, mantra. This is what creates the vibration of what we're moving towards in our life. We need to speak it. This is why priests of the ancient Vedic times were speaking their reality into being, into existence. There was a time when all humanity, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have Netflix, they told stories, and they lived the embodied essence of the poetry of wisdom by speaking it, by reciting it. This is all they did. They'd go, they'd chop wood, they'd cook their fish, then they'd sit together, they'd om, they'd hum some tones, and they would experience and live the reality of the Vedas by speaking it. This is all they did back in the day. This was the thing to do. So the tongue, the speech, is the vessel of conveyance for the divine wisdom that comes through us. This is why Juhvataha, which is tongues of flame, is the entry point of the divine. It's the entry point of the sacrifice. And this is why Juhvataha, which is your speech, which is what you align yourself with, it's the tongue which licks the offerings in order to produce yajamana, which is a worshiper. Now, Vic Dicara is going to give us more understanding. Teresa's giving us a good point, too. The tongue is vascular. It can absorb some substance and bypass the digestion to go straight to the bloodstream. Very, very cool, Teresa. That's a cool point. The tongue, it's already absorbing things just when you put food into it. So, yajamana, we need Juhvataha in order to produce yajamana. Now, the way Ernst gives it is simply worshipers. It turns us into a worshiper in a way. This seems to be how Ernst is conveying it. The auspiciousness, the fortune of wisdom, is us worshiping from above, and this produces worshipers from below. In order to be in the abundance of wisdom, you need to worship in order to become a worshiper. It's interesting that you could almost say it this way. The fortune of wisdom is when worshiping makes us into a worshiper. And it shows that a worshiper somebody who is in a devotional, worshipful alignment with the wisdom of the divine. When you worship the divine, you are in its power, and therefore its power is in you. It can't go the other way around. This is how we become the fortune of wisdom, is by worshiping it and essentially serving it. Serving it not in a Christian sort of like, I am a slave to the gods of the altar of the priest. It's more like, I am the living embodiment of the divine, and I have to act like it. And the only way to act like it is to have the infrastructure of wisdom to move through as a worshiper of it. This is kind of my interpretation here, folks. Now, let's see what Vic Dicara says to sort of unfold this in a little bit more of a intrinsic way, shall we say. My neighbors are being a bit loud, but that's okay. So, now we're going on to Vic Dicara's translation of this Nakshatra Sutra. Brihaspati's Tishyaha Jhvataha Parastad Yajamana Avastad. Brihaspati is the Lord of prosperity and expansion. That's a useful extra understanding. Tishya is success, fruition, and prosperity. So the success of wisdom, the fruition of wisdom, and that's why there's the symbol of the flower. This is the fruiting of the wisdom that permeates everything, as Punarvasu, the previous nakshatra. Jhvataha, as we've said, is the flames of rituals. It can be understood as tongues, also as words, and this interesting word vak. Vic does not describe to us in here what exactly vak means. You would have to check out his nakshatras course on his website in order to see that enigmatic statement. And I recommend it. If you guys are enjoying this and if you want to explore the nakshatras more, the best work that has been done on the nakshatras so far as I've seen is by Vic Dicara himself. He goes into way more detail than we're going here. I'm just describing what he gives in his book. He goes through much more on his website, and I highly recommend it. Jhvataha is needed in order to produce yajamana. Yajamana are the performers of rituals and wise actors. You can only be a wise actor if you are living the embodiment of it. You know, how I would describe this is kind of like, you know, when I'm a musician and I love to sing songs. And there's a lot of times where I'm sitting with my guitar and I need to look at the words in order to remember the story. And a lot of the times I'll go through the words, I'll imbibe myself with the meaning of it so that eventually I don't need the paper, because by singing it, it gets installed in my neuromuscular memory. And you can even lean on that. But there are some times when the neuromuscular memory of the melody is not enough. I'll start singing something and I'll go to start verse 2, but I actually start verse 3 because it sounds the same. So there's something else that needs to happen. A true good songwriter who remembers the lyrics. You know, and you see somebody that memorize all these lyrics and you think like, how do they memorize all that? If you ever ask them, they simply say, well, I think of the story. I know the narrative. It starts off in verse 1 and this is happening. Then in verse 2, only in verse 2, this part is happening. And this is what leads us to verse 3. So you remember the story. You live the emotional content of the story as you speak it. And this is the same thing that's happening here. If you want to be a wise actor, if you want to live, if you're an actor and you want to memorize lines, the way to do it is not just memorize it by rote. You have to live in the embodied emotional wisdom of what is said there. So that's why we need to be in a fully flaming, true expression of our words in order to become a true performer of the ritual, a true wise actor of the wisdom being expressed. Teresa makes a good point. Our boy Michael Reed, he's a fella who is also on YouTube, and he also does great work on the nakshatras. So this is how Vic Dicara brings it all down. This top part does not come from the authentic art of Vedic astrology. That's the bottom. Excuse me. The top comes from his website. He has a whole series of lessons describing the nakshatras, and he gives them a little bit differently, just, to give a little bit of more understandings of how to say the same thing. The fortune, Tishya, of the Lord of Prosperity, Brihaspati, needs tongues to guide wise actors. And we could translate this another way. This actually comes from the book we're about to read. It's Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology. The success of the master advisor needs tongues for the aspirant. Whether that means the tongue of the teacher or the tongue of the student. And in my opinion, the tongue of the student, as I've understood it, is really both are important. But the tongue of the student needs to express the mantra that the master gives him in his own way, and to make the wisdom his own through living it and through speaking it, through being a part of the wisdom, through the mouth, through the tongue. And every time you do a mantra, every time you speak the wisdom of the Veda, and we're talking about the Vedas, we're talking about this literature and this wisdom, we are giving our ghee, swaha, into the fire of Agni in order to live the embodied wisdom. And I thank you all for being here with me while we do this. But it's not enough for me to tell it to you and for it to go into your ears. We all have to live this embodied wisdom in our own way. And that's part of the wisdom that is given in this Nakshatra Sutra in general. Now, I've been rapping about this in my own way quite a bit. Let's start to get into what Vic Dicara has given us for this particular nakshatra. Here now, folks, we are going to be reading from Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology by Vic Dicara. Now we're going to start getting into, the nakshatras, they have a double resonance, especially these Nakshatra Sutras. They are, as you can see, really what we've just leaned into is less of a natal depiction of somebody with planets in Pushya, and more of a universal collective wisdom. We could say this about the zodiac too. We could talk about planets being in Gemini, but we can also talk about how Gemini is before Taurus. It is the doing of our resources. And everybody would do well to start from the superconscious, speak what's in the superconscious, and then act on what is spoken through Gemini. And then through Gemini, what we do is helps to create the vessel of the heart in Cancer. So there's a wisdom in the zodiac that's universal, but it's also an astrological space where planets can fall that gives karma to the specific person. There's universal lessons, and then there's specific planets as an astrological phenomenon. We are going to be reading both by reading Vic Dicara. And everything we've just spoken about is sort of universal. We're going to start dialing in what this means to the native with planets falling into the nakshatra Pushya. Pushya, blossoming fortune. This is what we're reading at this present moment. And again, as I said, this comes from Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology by Vic Dicara. So, what we first read is a little bit of a depiction of what is meant by brihaspati. There's a connection of a word here that you've probably heard. It's called brihat. You'll probably, if you're into Vedic astrology, you've probably heard this as a headlining for many texts. Brihat Jataka, Brihat Parashara Horashastra. It basically means vastness, expanse, expansive expansion. You know, Brihat Jataka is like an expansion on the Jataka. Brihat Parashara Horashastra is an expansion on Parashara's Horashastra. So the word brihaspati has this expansiveness implied in it. Brihat literally means vastness, expanse, weight, and significance. Significance is a good word. Now, pati, you've probably heard this word through, it means like the Lord, the protector, the husband, the father, the guide, or the Lord. And you've seen this likely in many other things as well. For example, another word for Ganesha, Ganeshwara, is Ganapati, the Lord, the Father, the protector of Gana, which is light and sound, vision and feeling, coming together, having a Lord that looks over top of it all. So, Brihaspati is the god whom all the other gods rely on for their guidance. My computer is starting to give me some backlash here. Hopefully we don't have any clicks and pops, but we very well might. We've been doing okay though, so that's cool. Now, Brihaspati is the god whom all the other gods rely on for guidance and practical advice on how to succeed in their endeavors. If you understand the Vedic literature, you'll know that there are 3 levels of the sublime consciousness that is the divine human consciousness. There's the asuras, the elementals on the bottom, and then there's the devas, the gods of the superconscious on top. You know, it's basically everything above the heart chakra is devas, usually born of a deity, Swaha Loka. And then below the heart, we have Bhu and Puva, and that's the Aditi, that's the Asuras, and as well as even the elementals of earth. So the Asuras and the Devas are always in this sort of back and forth between each other. The Devas themselves of the superconscious have lives, they have narratives where they're seeking to embody their own dharma. And in order to embody their own dharma, they need the guidance of some kind of wisdom. This is why, if you understand in the Vedic literature, there's often times where, for example, the best example to give is Indra. I love the character of Indra. I'm just a moon myself, so I embody Indra. And he's a rascal character. He is the divine sense of the devas. It's like the higher octave of the ego is Indra. We all have a superconscious that is still looking to come into complete embodiment, and it makes mistakes along its way, along its path. So Indra is the deity, the deva, who often gets into trouble because it is the aspect of our superconscious that is learning its power, but still being in a diplomatic transpersonal energy field with all of the other devas around it. Just like how even when us as individual humans come into the power of realizing the divine energy that's coming through our spine, manifested as the 5 indriyas, the 5 internal sense organs, we still need to understand ourselves in a transpersonal context of the people all around us, so we don't get a Jesus complex and start, You do a hit of acid, you realize you're the divine, and then you walk down the street stopping cars because you're the divine. It's like, yeah, it's cute, you're the divine, but you can still get hit by a car. So this is almost like the story of Indra. So Indra gets into trouble all the time. And there's a point when, for example, where Indra always gets his just desserts of going too far is when he messes with a sage. The sage is the embodiment of pure, true wisdom. So, for example, there's a story where Indra sees a sage who is living out their dharma. They're just being the perfect, pure dharma. And this sage has a wife. And Indra notices that the wife of this sage is one of the most beautiful beings he's ever seen. He gets jealous of the sage, and he essentially manifests as the sage and goes and wants to have sex with the sage's wife. The sage realizes it because he can sense it. He forgives his wife because the wife just thought Indra was her husband. And the sage says, okay, Indra, you're an idiot. Now you are going to have a body full of little vaginas all over your body. That's a whole story we're going to get into when we get into Indra. But the point is that Indra is a deity who is punished by a sage, because the sage is the priest of the deities. The sage is wisdom incarnate. It's brihaspati. And this is what is represented by Pushya. Pushya is this divine wisdom that permeates every loka, every aspect of reality. So Pushya is very important in the, again, the previous nakshatra Punarvasu is the inherent essence of wisdom. But brihaspati is the living embodiment of wisdom in our lives. Punarvasu is like the birthing of it. It's the mother of it. It's a deity. Pushya is the child of wisdom who actually is the caretaker of it. Aditi is one of the Adityas, is one of the devas. It's the mother of the devas. And she births the devas, but even she is amenable to wisdom itself, which is brihaspati. Now, this is me just kind of, shooting the breeze about this particular thing. So what we read from Vic Dicara is that brihaspati is the god whom all the other gods rely on for guidance and practical advice on how to succeed in their endeavors. Sometimes brihaspati is referred to as guru. Both of these names denote a personality who is very important, brihat, because of being big, vast, and heavy with knowledge and experience. This is what the sages are. The sages are the true living embodied guru. And this is why Jupiter is correlated with this. Pushya is a nakshatra that resonates with Jupiter. Or really, I should say that Jupiter resonates with. Pushya is kind of first. Wisdom is first. Jupiter, as guru, embodies that wisdom. It resonates. It's cut from the same cloth, but brihaspati is the cloth that was there first. Jupiter is cut from brihaspati's cloth, not the other way around. Now, the next word we have here is Tishya. And this, of course, as we've seen, means like abundance, prosperity. Tishya is an older name for Pushya. The meaning of both these names is very, very similar. Pushya literally means the nourisher, the one who enables growth. This is the guidance of Guru, who allows you to be truly spiritually growing and being nourished from what you are, from self-realization. Now, Tishya refers to the object of nourishment. the one who has succeeded in blossoming and growing. The classic symbols for this nakshatra, which is milk and breasts, these are illustrations of the word Pushya. Now, Pushya being the nourisher, it's the breast that gives the nourishment, the spiritual nourishment. You know, the fact of wisdom, the sage, is the cosmic breast that nourishes the spirit out of which it is born back to its self-realization. Tishya represents the other classical symbol of this nakshatra, which is a blossomed flower. Tishya, as it's represented in the Nakshatra Sutras, is the object of prosperity. It is prosperity embodied. It is the thing that has successfully inseminated itself with the wisdom of the sage, of brihaspati. Now, the next word we have is juhvataha, and this is getting into, again, the ceremonial esoteric dimension of this nakshatra. Juhvataha literally means tongues. The word is used as a reference to fire, because fire is notorious for having tongues of flame. Ceremonial fire, thought of as the mouth of the gods. Ceremonial fire is thought of as the mouth of the gods, through which they eat sacrificial offerings. It's the material aspect of our bodies trying to get in touch with the superconscious devas. The way to do that is a sacrifice, a burning of something in the material, which will turn into the vaporous spirit that we seek to embody. God can only be manifested if you make space for it. How we make space for it is removing that which is obstructing the infinite space of a deity, of God. So by purifying aspects of ourselves, by removing our aspects of ourselves, there is the space that is made for the divine. Now, tongues also refers to the organ of speech, and thus juhvataha refers to language and speech. Sometimes ceremonial priests are called juhvataha because, actually what we read here is, sometimes ceremonial priests are called juhvata because they use their tongues to pronounce the words of the mantras. In the context of this sutra, juhvata refers especially to the type of speech that a priest, guide, or guru uses, which in other words means advice and guidance. So this is why Vic kind of says that the prosperity of brihaspati is advice and guidance from a qualified teacher or guru or priest or someone who is embodying juhvataha, the tongue of the gods, someone who's giving good advice. So juhvataha, someone as giving good advice as an advisor, is needed in order to produce yajamana. Now, the word yajamana literally means the performance of yajna, the performance of sacrifice, the performance of the true sacrifice that you are meant to do. We all have many ways that we could live our lives, but there's one specific narrow gate that reflects the karma that you are. You have a specific karma, you have a specific form, and therefore you have a specific things that you need to purify, to burn with Agni in order to manifest the divine inside yourself. And it can only happen through your specific karma. So this is why it's called a yajna. The word yajna literally means effort or a determined undertaking. Typically, it refers to a ceremony, the classical version of an organized effort. An organized effort. A life lived consciously, not unconsciously. A conscious effort towards whatever the self is perpetuating. Now, in ceremonial contexts, the yajamana is the ceremony's initiator and beneficiary. It's the person for whom the ceremony is performed. There's the universal yajna, which is, there's a sameness to it, but the individual person who is embarking on the yajna and who the ceremony is for, is the yajamana. So in this context of this sutra, this points to the person who endeavors to achieve a goal. So what we're seeing is that the flowering of wisdom is advice given and taken with dedication and devotion from somebody and put in a dedicated way from the yajamana, the person who's endeavoring to achieve a goal. We've got what produces yajamana, what produces somebody who's intending to not be unconscious and willy-nilly and just get through life. A yajamana is somebody who's looking to live with intention. The only way to live with intention is through advice from a proper guru, a proper advisor. And this is the flowering of wisdom. So, in summary, as we are seeing here, the sutra has a very ceremonial motif because Brihaspati is the foremost expert on Vedic ceremony, and it functions as the god's priest. So the sutra can be very literally read and simply as the successful priest needs to light a fire for the ceremony's beneficiary. If we read the words in a slightly broader context, the same meaning can be written as, the master of prosperity, Brihaspati, creates good fortune by giving guidance to make wise endeavorers. Brihaspati creates good fortune by giving guidance to wise endeavorers. Ideally, if all your planets are going well, whatever's going on in this nakshatra, you will get good guidance from good advisors. You have the sense to seek good advice and guidance from worthy advisors. And this will they will embody Brihaspati, and you will embody the yajamana, as a wise endeavorer, listening to the good advice. So there's two dimensions of what's needed here for a native, is to seek good advice and then to take it. Both of these can get mixed up if you have ill planets here, as we're going to talk about. So Vic tells us that, in other words, success, Tishya, depends on being wise and efficient in one's endeavors, yajamana. Being wise and efficient in one's endeavors depends on having good advice, juhvata, from competent guides who are truly embodying Brihaspati. Now, we're starting to get into the astrological layer of having planets in this nakshatra. Let's check out the interpretive understanding of what is being conveyed by this Nakshatra Sutra. What we read is that Pushya is welcome in almost any context. But because it depends on good advice, malfunctions here indicate being at odds with teachers and guides, and hesitation due to feeling insufficiently educated, under-advised, and ill-informed. So when there's things going wrong with this nakshatra, it usually indicates that there are tough, bad planets there that are not serving our desire to feel sufficiently educated, sufficiently advised, and sufficiently informed. Now, it could very well be, we could almost, there's a part of me that could even play with this, if you've got Jupiter at the very end of the sign of what is now tropical Cancer. You've got Jupiter in Pushya, that's a good thing. But if you've got something like, Mercury is strongly aspecting that Jupiter somehow. It's like you've got Jupiter you've got Jupiter or being aspected by Mercury or Venus, or Saturn is directly conjunct this Jupiter. These are examples where you could be getting good advice because the Jupiter is in Pushya, but you aren't sure of how to take it, if you're worthy of taking it, or you doubt the teacher. You doubt the nature of the wisdom coming to you. It's also possible you could have Mars debilitated in Cancer, in Pushya, and you could be so pushy but also passive with the nature of your wisdom that you're not discerning about your teacher. So you just go and get advice from just any old person. This is kind of how I'm interpreting it. I'm gonna lean on Vic's writing here before I start making my own things. But I've already read this, and I'm kind of getting that from that. But I'm gonna read Vic's thing first, and then we'll play around with my interpretation. Ultimately, Pushya depends on good advice, and so it malfunctions here indicate being at odds with teachers and guides. Hesitation due to feeling insufficiently educated, under-advised, and ill-informed. Since it is a gentle, nourishing nakshatra, symbolized by flowers, milk, and breasts, the masculine and strict planets here tend to indicate the malfunction noted above, brought on by a skepticism of guides, which surely has rational cause, but needs to be realistically resolved. So these are masculine and strict planets here in Pushya, can cause a skepticism of the wisdom that you're getting. And again, this has a possible rational cause. You're trying to be discerning, but needs to be realistically resolved. And Vic gives us a little bit about that. So for this reason, gentle and feminine planets, which is the Moon, Venus, Mercury, and in this case especially Jupiter, Vic gives us a footnote that since Jupiter tries to do the exact same thing as Pushya, Jupiter is addressed as brihaspati in Vedic astrology. So gentle and feminine planets, which is Moon, Venus, and Mercury, but this is also Jupiter. Even though Jupiter's not feminine, it is brihaspati. So it works well in Pushya. These gentler planets tend to indicate very positive things in this nakshatra. There's an ability to trust in guidance from qualified persons. This leads to being efficient and effective in endeavors, leading to increased success. Now, this is one of the reasons why we want to discern between rashis and nakshatras, because this is an inherent wisdom that is its own thing in its own way. If you've got Venus in Pushya, there will be some positive capacity to be open to guides, teachers, leaders, and advisors. It's interesting and rather unfortunate that in today's time, Pushya spans Cancer and Leo. These are both places where Venus is not in its favorite spot. Venus is going to be thirsty in Cancer and starved in Leo, which means that a Venus in the beginning of Leo, at 0 degrees Leo, 1 degree of Leo, that's in Pushya, will be getting technically good advice, but there might be some a pushiness to find the right advice, which means you might not be as discerning as you should be, as well as a haughtiness with teachers, some problems dealing with authority, a feeling like Venus wants to be regarded in Leo as being hot shit. And when it meets a teacher, if Venus is well placed, because Venus can still do well in Leo, it's not well by sign. But if Venus is trine, if Mercury is right beside Venus in Leo, Mercury will be in good friendly dignity, and it will delight this Venus. So that even though there's the egotism of Venus in Leo, it still can be humble enough to put down its ego and listen to the advice being given to it through Pushya. Right? So this is kind of how we got to understand and treat these things in a modern time. Ultimately, these feminine planets, especially Jupiter, because Jupiter does well in Cancer, it's exalted, and it does well in Leo. It's in a friendly sign. Jupiter in this area is especially fruitful, especially in today's time. But in general, it does well here. The moon would do well, because it's either in Cancer or Leo. Cancer is its own sign. Leo is a friendly sign. Mars would do well at the beginning of Leo, especially. But Mars it can be a bit too pushy with teachers. It has an authority complex. Now, if Mars is in Pushya at the beginning of Leo, and it's in trine to Jupiter or trine the Sun, it's going to have a little bit of help. Mars in particular does bad with Pushya at the end of Cancer, where it's debilitated. It might not get the greatest advice, and it's not, because it's in Cancer, it's not discerning about the advice that it gets. Okay, because that's Mars in Cancer. It's not sharp. It's kind of happy with whatever it's got going on, which is not Mars's best place to be. It's happy improving itself. Mars in Cancer is happy not improving itself and not being discerning. Saturn is going to have a hard time here, especially. Saturn might be one of the tougher ones going on here. It's going to be thirsted in Cancer, and it's going to be especially starved in the sign of Leo. And there will most certainly be authority problems where essentially this is a Saturn that has trouble resting, digesting, and becoming. This is the best way to say it, is that Saturn in this area has a hard time becoming, whether it's in Cancer or Leo. It wants to be safe and secure now. We all are in a state of becoming, coming into the security. We need to go through the darkness in order to redeem the light of the divine that's inside us all, which means sometimes you just gotta have a teacher who you sit with, who smacks you on the head and says, you are not the best person you can be yet. You are not the best person you can be yet. Here's how you do it. Here's the advice. Saturn is so, it does, usually what happens if you got Saturn somewhere else, you find your peace, you learn how to have structure so that you can go to someone for guidance and advice, and they say, smack, you could do better. And you go, okay, I can accept this state of becoming because I'm calm. I've got a stable life. I've got pillars that I'm standing on that are solid. So now I can come to a leader for advice and take it and absorb it into myself. Saturn is trying to find stability in the presence of a teacher. And here, it's always going to say, but teacher, I'm trying to be stable in this. And the teacher's just going to do what the teacher does and say, you are not there yet. And Saturn's going to be embarrassed by it. So this is an especially, someone with Saturn in Pushya, whether it's Cancer or Leo, is going to have difficulty here, especially if this is your Atmakaraka, if this is an angular lord, the 10th, 4th, 7th, or 1st lord. these themes are going to be very relevant related to whatever house Saturn rules. Saturn's an easy one to talk about of the difficulty that could be conveyed here. The sun in Pushya is tropically at this time, either in Cancer or Leo, and that's not such a hard place by sign, but the sun is still, if the sun has bad aspects from friends, if it doesn't have good Shodball, if it doesn't have good Vimshopak, then the sun here would be antagonized by authority. Even if it's in Leo, the sun can still, again, the signs only convey so much. If the sun has angles from enemies, Venus and Saturn in particular, the sun is going to have an ego when it comes to dealing with authority. How dare you tell me how I can be better? I know how I can be better, and you don't know what's best for me. Middle finger. And the teacher says, very well, great, good, thanks for clarifying. Now I'm going to go find somebody who's more worth my wisdom. Frig off. And then the sun goes and tries to find a teacher that the sun is comfortable with at this present time, but the teacher might just cater to the sun's blistering hot energy. Probably what'll happen is that the sun here might actually get good teachers, and if the sun is well placed, it'll sit with the pain of growing and becoming. If the sun is not well placed, you might still get good teachers, and those teachers will force you to improve, and the ego in you won't be able to take it. And you might miss the opportunity of having a great teacher. You just can't sit with it because the sun is not matured enough to deal with the pain of dharma, the pain of growth, the pain of the narrow gate. So the sun is one of those harsh planets that can go one way or the other, really. But according to Vic Dicara, by nakshatra understanding, the sun in Pushya is tough. Mars in... We had a pop there, folks. Sorry about that. It's my computer. The sun, Mars, and Saturn was tough. The audio is lagging, Mary. Is the audio still lagging? I wonder if that's been happening for a while. It's this darn computer. Thank you, Mary, for letting me know. Is it still... Yes, it is. Damn. Well, I'm going to try to do a quick reset here, folks. Hopefully that fixes our... Thank you, Mary. Hopefully this fixes our audio situation. If it doesn't, we just got to roll. I got to get a new computer. Okay. We're going to be... Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Miss Stell. I appreciate you guys. But I'm going to see if I can fix the audio issue by signing out and in. The stream should keep going. If this doesn't fix it, then we're just going to keep going. Okay. Check, 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 check. Hello, everybody. If you guys are here and you're hanging out with me, let me know, is the audio off of my voice, off of my mouth? Because if it is, then we've just got to rock and roll. I would love to know. Hopefully it's not, but if it is, then we're just going to keep on moving. Thankfully, we've done all of our visual presentation. Now this can just take the form of a podcast. It's much better. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Okay, cool. So, let's move forward with where we're at here, ladies and gentlemen. One of the last things I want to say here is Rahu and Ketu. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your feedback. Rahu and Ketu are malefic planets, but they're not necessarily masculine. Vic Dicara does not mention Rahu and Ketu in Pushya. In my opinion, what would probably happen here is that Ketu might experience being used to getting good advice. And whatever's the dispositor of Ketu, if it's well placed, it will probably be discerning about good advice. If Ketu is at the end of Cancer and the moon is delighted and it's well placed, if it's exalted, if it's got good Vimshopak and Shadbala, if it's got good angles from friends, the moon will learn how to adapt in order to do well the agenda of Ketu, because Ketu is only as good as its dispositor. As well, like things can happen. Like, for example, if you have Mercury in Cancer, Mercury is thirsty for a certain type of knowledge. So if you got Ketu at the end of Cancer, and Mercury doesn't do well because it's thirsted by the moon when it's in Cancer. So what you have is a Ketu that is antagonistic towards the idea of good advice. When Ketu's by itself in Pushya, it's probably used to getting good advice, and Ketu makes you go away from things, but you need to still integrate Ketu. So Ketu in Cancer might feel, at the end of Cancer in Pushya, might feel like a bit of antagonism towards good advice. But a guru, if they have the dharma of a guru coming to them, a guru will find them, and the guru will say, you still need to listen to good advice. Don't throw away your Ketu completely. And the person with Ketu and Pushya will have to learn and say, okay, even though I'm sick of Pushya, I'm sick of having to deal with wisdom because I've done it in the past, I still need to get good advice about my particular path of dharma, because everybody needs it. Everybody is well served by guru, even someone with Ketu and Pushya. You need to just absorb in order to move through the karma that you are experiencing in this life. You do still need to keep Ketu. Ketu is the meaning of the phrase that you want to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. You want to know the reality of good advice. Sit with it. Take all the advice you can from good people who are good advisors. Be discerning about it, but also just recognize it when it's good and when it's there. This is what Ketu in here needs to learn. Now, if you've got bad Lajjhatadhyavashtas happening in Cancer, if Mercury is in Cancer, or even if you've got the Sun and Saturn conjunct in Cancer at the start of Cancer, let's say, but you've got Ketu and Pushya at the end of Cancer, since the Lajjhatadhyavashta is happening in Cancer, things related to the moon, because they're all working through the same dispositor. Essentially, in that case, the Sun and Saturn would be shaming each other. So there would be, because Ketu is in Pushya, there would be shame related to advice, related to bad advice. Because this is what Ernst Wilhelm, I've been watching Ernst Wilhelm's new Rashi Sutras course. I highly recommend it to everybody. Anything happening inside of a sign, like Cancer, permeates the whole sign. Even if Sun and Saturn are conjunct at 2 degrees of Cancer, all the other planets in Cancer are affected by that. Cancer, the embodiment that is Cancer, is affected by whatever is going on inside of Cancer. So Sun and Saturn being in Cancer, and then Ketu being in Pushya, you would need to be learning, you would again be antagonistic to advice. But Ketu would find people who come to them and remind them of where they're coming from Ketu in their past lives, and they would need to get over an ego complex about taking advice and growing, because that's signified by Sun and Saturn together and the Ketu and Pushya. Hello. Let me know if the audio went off there, folks. Technology. Blech. Rahu in Pushya is going to be different depending on, I should say Ketu in Pushya has a certain vibe, and it's a bottom that needs to be digested in order to fully successfully integrate wherever Rahu is, whatever nakshatra Rahu is in. If you've got Rahu in Pushya, you need to integrate wherever Ketu is, which would be opposite. In this case, it would probably be, for example, if you've got Rahu in Pushya, then you've probably got Ketu either in Uttara Ashada or in Shravana. So you've got to digest where your Ketu is in order to be stable on your journey of Rahu and Pushya, which is essentially to learn how to get good advice. The idea of advice is very important to you. You might very well have the dharma of becoming brihaspati for somebody else, for other people, for being a leader, a teacher. Somebody, Ketu in Pushya needs to learn how to get good advice in order that it can do the Rahu thing. Rahu in Pushya might be someone who's inclined to give good advice. Might be a part of your dharma and your destiny. And which means, since it's Rahu, there's a deep, fatalistic, sweet tooth craving to be someone who can give good advice. Or to even get good advice, to understand advice and wisdom, to get good counseling and to probably give good counseling. And to use the counseling in all the other dharmas defined by the rest of your astrology chart. So if you have Rahu and Pushya, it's very important. There's going to be a deep desire to be led by someone who's a capable advisor, by a father figure, by some kind of protector. And it's likely that if you've got Rahu and Pushya and the dispositor is doing well, let's say, we'll take the example of Rahu in the beginning of Leo, 1 degree of Leo at this time of our day and age. Then Rahu being in Pushya will do well depending on where the sun is. If your sun's doing very well, the Rahu in Pushya will have an open door to positively experiencing the submissiveness needed towards a guru who is willing to help you improve. Because the sun already wants to be its best if the sun is well placed. The sun's close to the 10th house. It's close to exaltation. It's got good aspects from friends, good Vimshopak, good Shadbala. It's got all these things. It wants to improve. And so it will be humble on its path of being the greatness that it is. Rahu and Pushya will probably drive you to find good advisors, and you probably will find them. If you have complications with the sun, you'll want to embody the best in yourself, to be a king. But you'll want to be like when we see Jimi Hendrix on guitar, someone with Rahu and Pushya with a bad sun or with bad things happening in Leo will say, I want to be Jimi Hendrix. And I'm just going to go and find whoever can promise me that they'll make me Jimi Hendrix. So you'll go find a teacher who's just some shabby guitar teacher who's just like willing to take your money. Oh yeah, you want to be Jimi Hendrix? Sure. So let's just move through it. And you might not be discerning about your teacher because you just want to be Jimi Hendrix. You'll get frustrated on your path and the teacher will just say, well, just keep coming to me. We'll keep doing our scales. The teacher's not listening to what you actually need. They're just going to force you to do scales that you don't want to do. They're not going to tell you that you need to practice. Learn to find the heart of your instrument. Get into the sound and joy of playing your instrument so that it fits you, so it fits your path. Be patient with yourself on your path to becoming the great guitarist you want to be. All these things would be things that a good teacher would hear. Person with Pushya at the beginning of Leo, Rahu and Pushya, is not going to take that good advice if they do get... Hello, we're back. A person with Rahu and Pushya in the... I'll say it again. It sucks that my computer's going through this. Someone with Rahu and Pushya at the beginning of Leo with a maligned sun or bad things happening in Leo won't take good advice and will find bad advice. They'll listen to the snake oil salesman who just will keep asking for money and more time, and this person will get frustrated And they might learn over time through Rahu what makes a good teacher and a bad teacher. But it could be a long, painful go, because this is how the nakshatras can go with Rahu and Ketu in the nakshatras. So this is the longest we've ever gone through with Rahu and Ketu in the nakshatras. I feel good about it. I think I'm going to try and do this little spiel every time we do an interpretation of planets in the nakshatras. Let me know if you guys are vibing with that, because I feel good about what I just laid out. Ultimately, something to consider is that every age is going to have the nakshatras placed in different signs. So the nakshatras are a living embodiment. They are luminaries. And anything that happens in that star grouping of that nakshatra is a living embodiment in its own way. And wherever the signs are, 12,000 years from now, Pushya is going to be probably closer to like Capricorn and Aquarius. And then Pushya will have the same eternal meaning, but it'll mean something different in that era because planets in Pushya will be falling into the other side of the zodiac. Oh, thank you, Mary Madeline. I appreciate, tips are never expected, but always appreciated, and I thank you for it. So, this has been our interpretation of planets inside of Pushya, and I'm pretty happy with how that went. Now, let's take a peek at the life lesson of, we've just spoken to the individual karma of somebody with planets inside of Pushya. Now let's look at the universal lesson implied by the wisdom that Pushya represents. Vic Dicara tells us, the life lesson in this sutra concerns the conundrum, should I strike while the iron is hot? Or is the iron not yet hot enough, and should I wait until I'm more prepared? Wait till I've got better advice. Wait until I can understand the advice better. Decisiveness. That's yajamana, the actual effort. Without preparation, jufata, the guidance, will fail. If we're decisive, yajamana, without guidance, jufata, we will fail. But preparation without decisive action is also fruitless. Jahvataha, without acting on it as yajamana, is also fruitless. This is why, as I said, we need to embody the parastat as well as the avastat in this funny sort of way, this funny sort of tantrically embodied balance in every single moment. Jahvataha is what's needed, and yajamana is what is produced. But if we only stick to what is needed without acting on the avastat, in this case the second word being yajamana, we can focus only on jahvataha and become indecisive and never really embody the wisdom. That's why both need, that's the enigmatic nature of these sutras, is that both kind of need to happen. So preparation without decisiveness is also fruitless. Certainly we should not rush into decisive and committed actions on things that we know little or nothing about. But equally certain, we must not put off acting. Doing it, trying it, that is an important and absolutely essential part of education and learning. So, rather than waiting till we are fully informed, we should certainly put our advice and knowledge into practice in the real world, little by little, bit by bit. Very good, Vic Dicara. God, I love him. This will ensure two important things. One, It will regularly check that our sources of guidance are reasonable and our understanding of their guidance is correct. Number 2, it will prevent us from being either too underprepared or too overprepared, too timid or too hasty. And this is surely the best life lesson that could be given, especially for anyone with Ketu or Rahu in Pushya, as well as anybody with any important planets here, especially, I should say, the Lagna and the Moon. The Sun also would be embodying these lessons very strongly as well. If you have other feminine planets here, this is probably natural for you. But if you have difficult planets like Mars or Saturn, even a malefic Mercury, this is a lesson that will be useful in your application as well. And of course, Vic Dicara gives us a wonderful supplication at the end of each Nakshatra Sutra. It's a supplication. It's like him giving his own little wonderful prayer that he has, I don't know if he's created it or if this is a supplication that comes from one of the Brahmanas. I'd have to ask him one day just to see. I'd be curious if he makes these himself. This is like a little prayer for invoking the essence of the wisdom of this Nakshatra Sutra. Vic says, the great brihaspati can be found in Pushya Nakshatra. He leads all the gods to victory by his guidance. May his protection make us fearless wherever we go. Brihaspati protects us from harm in the beginning, the middle, and the end. We need not be afraid of our rivals. We become lordly and brave. Lovely. It's Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology, by our boy, Vic Dicara. So we can see why Vic Dicara really creates an embodied wisdom out of the nakshatras that is the furthest I've ever seen, in my opinion. Aho. I'm very grateful, and I feel very blessed that the Vedas exist and that I get to share them all with you here. Thank you, everybody, so much for being a part of this. Thank you, Mary Madeline. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Amber Patrick. And everybody who is joining with us live. It is of a great grace to be a part of this tradition that we are moving through here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, the next thing we're going to be moving through, this is again coming from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas by Radhe. We've discussed brihaspati. Now we're going to get further information of the astrology of a native with a particular emphasis of Pushya Nakshatra. This is most typically conveyed as having the moon in Pushya, but this can also mean the Lagna in Pushya. This can mean the Lagna Lord in Pushya. And as well, this can mean any planet as being a lord of any house. Now, if you've got the second lord in Pushya, it's going to mean a certain thing. If you've got the sixth lord, if you've got the 11th lord in Pushya, Pushya Nakshatra is going to express the tones of that lord in different ways. And that's what we're going to kind of read through a little bit here. Now, this author tends to do a very good job of conveying her interpretation of the lords inside of this nakshatra, as well as especially the moon and the Lagna. really anyone with any strong emphasis of this nakshatra. And we have to keep in mind that this author of this book, Radhe, she is herself a sidereal practitioner. So I'm going to be wary, and I'm going to try to mention when I see that her interpretation of the Pushya Native can sometimes carry with it the idea that that Cancer is inherently combined with the symbolism of Pushya, because that is the understanding of the sidereal astrologers, is that the nakshatras are married to their signs. Us tropical astrologers don't necessarily jive to that. And so we have to be careful to be discerning when there might be distortion in what we read here. Usually this author's pretty good, so I'm going to keep my eye out and see if I feel anything like that happening. But just keep in mind as we read this that the character of Pushya Native that she is portraying here might betray some of that unnecessary association of Cancer with Pushya. Even though Pushya at present is at the tail end of Cancer, we can't necessarily say that it's fully correlated there as tropical astrologers. So I digress. Even if you're a sidereal astrologer, you should still get something out of this. This is the Pushya Native. Of the 27 lunar nakshatras, Pushya is one of the most auspicious from a spiritual perspective. It imparts in its native devout interest in the sacred and profound curiosity about the higher meaning of life. Lofty subjects such as theology, philosophy, metaphysics, and world religions intrigue the Pushya Native. In Jyotisha texts and texts about ancient Indian astrology and astronomy, Pushya is associated with Shastra initiation, as well as educational endeavors. That comes from Muhurta Chintamani. Now, should the nodes of the moon occupy Pushya, here's something useful for us. If the nodes of the moon occupy Pushya, you should expect more eccentric, although potentially still sacred, initiations into Vedic literature and thought and energy. For example, the native might have a fascination with the archaic sciences of witchcraft, sorcery, shamanism, or the left-hand path of Tantra. Now, as we've read, we've gone through the character of brihaspati in Vedic literature, and what we note is that Brihaspati's father is Angiras, who authored the magical spells of the Atharva Veda. So Brihaspati, the lord of this nakshatra, himself was known to work with magic. So especially having Ketu or Rahu in Pushya, there might be some inclinations towards exploring these esoteric, subtle, supernatural, superconscious aspects of human consciousness. Now, we read here, let's see. Now, the author is giving us an illustration of someone named Alice Bailey, who had the Lagna. Oh, no, I can't use this. The author's giving us an example here that would only work with sidereal astrology, so I'm not going to speak to it here. Now, another foremost quality of Pushya, remember Pushya means to nourish. Another foremost quality of Pushya natives is an innate desire to support, nourish, and foster others. It's really what the guru is doing, is fostering the best inside of their student. So implications for the Pushya native include a decidedly maternal disposition, a motherly disposition, one which is likely to influence his vocation of choice. Perhaps the person is a professional caretaker, a nurse, a doctor, a chef, or even a dairy farm owner. Remember, the brihaspati also has an association with cows. So somebody who is a farmer taking care of many cows and animals has Pushya kind of written in it. So this maternal caretaking nature might play into the career and character and career objectives anyway, of someone with Pushya emphasis. I got a hair that's itching me. Now, Pushya also translates as to flower, meaning to blossom or to cause to flourish. Brihaspati cultivates his students by teaching the vidya, the vision, the truth of the Vedas. Brihaspati's teachings help students develop into wise, discerning, and spiritually productive individuals. Pushya Nakshatra encourages its native to do just the same. Depending upon the overall chart terrain, such energy is likely expressed through a career as a personal coach, a spiritual counselor, a teacher, or a professor. Perhaps the native is even an advisor to distinguished people. It's presidents, CEOs, chief political figures, or religious heads are the type of people that this person might counsel. After all, Brihaspati was the advisor to the gods themselves. We could really see this with the Lagna, with the moon, and also particular career things, obviously. If someone's MC, if someone's midheaven falls into the nakshatra Pushya, we can expect there to be some emphasis of this going on there in their career. Now, things can go awry for afflicted or exaggerated planets in Pushya. For example, under the right chart conditions, a Jupiter that is exalted here, mind you, it's specifically considered in Vedic astrology that an exaltation of a planet happens mostly in a certain part of the sign. For example, Jupiter is mostly exalted at around 0 to 5 degrees of Cancer, where Pushya is not. But it's still, most people would still consider that Jupiter at anywhere in Cancer still carries an exaltation energy to it, as well as delighted by the moon, its friend. So what we read is that a Jupiter that's in Cancer, that is under the right conditions, it's like Jupiter that's in Cancer, but still, whether it's got trines from its enemies, Mercury and Venus, or whether it has other illnesses, if it's in the 7th house where it's not as happy, if it's got ill Vimshopak, it's got ill Shadbala, all these different things. An exaggerated yet afflicted Jupiter in Pushya is capable of instilling a know-it-all attitude that offers literal tolerance for the thoughts and opinions of others. Similarly, we read that if extremist Rahu occupies Pushya, the native may be fanatical in their beliefs, venturing far beyond the boundaries of societal norms. Now, Mars being debilitated in Cancer can be emotionally charged about his ideals if Mars is in Pushya in Cancer. One might picture a passionately overzealous preacher or missionary. Someone who is acting on the wisdom of Pushya, but the Mars, again, is not discerning enough to clarify, to discern. So it's lazy in how it expresses a martial energy about Pushya. Now, what we read is that Clint Eastwood has Pushya moon. We also see that that moon is aspected by Mars in his chart. Clint Eastwood's popularity as an actor exploded with his role as Harry Callahan in the 5 Dirty Harry films. Clintwood's role Clintwood, that does say Clintwood, but it's supposed to say Clint Eastwood's role as Callahan is an example of the extremes that Pushya is capable of going to in the name of righteousness. Callahan, the character Callahan, is a badass cop who never hesitates to cross professional and ethical boundaries in pursuit of his own vision of justice. It's like a vigilante type of consciousness. Empire Online describes Callahan's character. Callahan is a shoot first, ask questions later type of guy, a bit of a pervert and a massive racist to boot. This is Pushya kind of gone to extremes. However, under optimal chart conditions, Pushya's divine, Deva, and dharmic inclinations, as stipulated by Jyotisha Shastra, as a planet's going well in Pushya, can instead produce an individual whose focus is on humanitarian issues or spiritual ideals of great concern to the world. Now, there's an example of someone here. Exemplary of this pristine potential is Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaja. And this is someone who had the moon and Jupiter in Pushya. The divine Sridhar Maharaja founded the Sri Caitanya Saravasta Mata, an Indian temple dedicated to the devotion of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Krishna. A vast library of his discourses and teachings formed the basis of books such as the Srimad Bhagavatam Gita, The Hidden Treasure of the Sweet Absolute, The Search for Sri Krishna, Reality of the Beautiful, and many more. Cool. Now, the responsibility to protect and conserve the Brahmin caste rests solely upon the shoulders of the character brihaspati. Plus, brihaspati is deeply vested in the cause, as his own exalted ranking is dependent upon it. The Brahmin caste represents the established sacred order of society. It's a social stratum with exclusive rights to the secret teachings of the Vedas. Its very existence mandates the exclusion of those who would come and taint and distort Vedic knowledge and literature. The Brahmin caste is also responsible for preserving wisdom from one generation to the next. These are all the good, ideal sides of the Brahmin caste, even though it itself can deteriorate in the annals of time due to human ignorance. The Brahmins established schools for instructing young boys in the Vedas and the ways of the yajna, the spiritual sacrifice. So thus, Pushya is cloaked in that ancient wisdom with its rites and rituals. So the native may actually actively participate in a secret society with its own language and arcane rites. This can mean the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, or the Hare Krishnas, interestingly. In a more mundane chart, Perhaps the native is a member of a club catering to the higher echelons of society, such as the Harvard Club, the Norwood Jewish Club, or New York's Core Club. Alternately, under different chart conditions, the native may be an activist for the preservation and protection of various societal groups, whose culture and ancient traditions are at risk of extinction. An example of this, and I think this is a great example this author gives, is the Native Americans. Somebody could be in Pushya, learn the ways of the Native American peoples, and be someone who is very intent on helping to continue to sustain the beautiful and important wisdom of the Native American peoples. Dope. For any Pushya people who are doing that, keep it going. But I get it, the natives of this nakshatra would be interested in continuing almost extinct ancient knowledges of various sorts. It should be noted that the function of the priest is highly ritualistic, mandating the execution of hundreds of thousands of rites and rituals. Each rite requires exacting perfection. Even a single mispronounced word or erroneously performed action can thwart the efficacy of the sacrifice. Hence, it's not unusual to find a perfectionist streak in this native, someone who's very used to getting something, doing it a million times, and mastering it profoundly, which can make for great actors, memorizing lines, performers of things that involve vocals, etc. Now, lording over an entire societal caste, as well as the singing Rigveds of the Vedas, Brihaspati possesses stellar leadership skills, and as well is adept in Arthashastra, which is political science. This is politics. This is people who endeavor to be important leaders in a community, important voices in a community. So this native may express a strong interest in governmental leadership positions, economic policy setting, or public administration. Of course, the native might simply prefer the profession of choir master, somebody who just likes to lead the music of a choir, or leading groups of people in general, similar to Indra. Now, lastly, mention should be made of the familial life of Brihaspati, the family life. As a devoted Brahmin, Brihaspati takes a vow of celibacy. This results in his wife Tara's discontent. She feels unloved. She feels like she can't get into the tantra and the embodied sensuality of woman. And so a very public affair happens between Tara, Brihaspati's wife, and Chandra, who's the signifier of the moon in the ancient Vedas. A variety of conjugal drama leading to public embarrassment can be possible for Pushya native, because they can be so focused on their spiritual austerity that they neglect to deal with what is happening with their wife. And this could be the same vice versa for a woman with Pushya qualities who misses out on that quality inside herself. Family and friends tend to get embroiled in such events and help exaggerate the drama by actively and vocally choosing sides. Perhaps the drama even makes front-page news or results in an ugly courtroom battle. And this is the Tarakamaya Samgrama, that story of the priest who had a wife, didn't care for his wife's emotional and sensual needs, and so she went and had an affair. And it was a big sociological thing. So, in a chart with fewer indications for publicity or notoriety, It could simply be that the spouse of the Pushya native never quite lives up to the lofty ideals and morals that they try to espouse, causing disillusionment with the institution of marriage. Interesting how marriage, austerity, commitment, devotion, truly, ultimately, how I feel is that if this native has Pushya emphasis in their chart and they abide by Tantra, by the essential needs of their lover while abiding within themselves, maintaining boundaries, maintaining communication, but also listening to their bodies. I'm a tantric person. I'm somebody who leans towards the austerity aspect of things, but I listen, the light of austerity, I feel it should be balanced with the sound of what is happening inside the human nervous system. Its desire for peace, for even eros, for sensuality, for enjoyment. I believe they can be mended together. And there's a great story that we tell in the video of Brihaspati that's in this series, where Venus, as the character that's called Shukracharya, Venus is the priest of the asuras, which is the demons of the flesh and the genotypes of the human physical body, and the emotional needs, the lower chakras. Venus rules the lower chakras. Jupiter is the priest of the higher chakras. And Jupiter, the priest of the higher chakras, can't eliminate the asuras. Instead, he wants to use their energy and sublimate it through the higher chakras. But the only way you're going to sublimate the lower chakras into the higher chakras is by tuning into the lower chakras. So there's a cool story that happens where Brihaspati, with Indra tricks Venus for Jupiter, who is Brihaspati. Indra tricks Venus, who's the priest of the lower chakras, by sending a woman to be Shukracharya's wife. And Shukracharya is so enamored by this wife, he's supposed to go and do some austerities. And he is tricked into becoming the husband of a woman. And by being the husband of a woman, Brihaspati secretly goes, and while Venus of the lower chakras is distracted with a wife, Brihaspati steals the attention of the asuras and sublimates it into the higher chakras. So having a wife, having a marriage partner can be a great way to still apply the sensuality, but you're doing it for love, for the Krishna inside your lover. You're doing it out of a sacrifice, to continue the sacrifice by enjoying the sublimated bliss of each other's lower chakras, ultimately trying to tune it so that you can sublimate it and bring it up to the higher chakras for both your sake. Because all aspects of the human body are divine, but they need to be orchestrated in a divine way by austerity mixed with compassion. And this is again Ganapati, the light and sound, finding harmony in the center. That's my rather tantric take on this, because ultimately I think someone with Pushya Nakshatra, while they may be inclined to be an austere person, an austere soul is still in the same boat as all of us, having physical needs as well as emotional needs, as well as mental needs, as well as spiritual needs. And everybody can find that balance, because the self in one is the self in all. You might have some part of your character that needs to play through. Maybe you want to be more austerity driven than sensual driven. And so you need to apply this priest-like connection to brahmacharya, to a contained awareness of your sensual energies. And that might be right for you. That might be right for some people. But don't go thinking that just because you're Pushya Native, that it's universally going to be right for you. You need to explore it yourself, and especially find guidance on the matter. Find somebody who will talk with you about it, talk you through it, and help you realize within yourself how you ought to best approach sexuality on your path to being an austere practitioner of the Vedas. So, I hope everybody has enjoyed that. That was coming from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras, as portrayed in the Vedas by the author Radhe. I always love doing this stuff with you guys. I've had a few folks hanging out with me live. Irene Mack, Mary Madeline, Teresa, Amber Patrick. This has been a great time as usual, folks. I love conveying this stuff with you. I love just talking about the Vedas. And I feel very blessed to be able to move through it by my own passion. And it's nice to be heard and seen by you guys as well. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed this. Let me know if that felt good to hear and read about what we've just gone through. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. Stay in touch with me, folks, because somewhere along the line, we're going to go through all these nakshatras one way or the other. That is my stated plan. Thanks for watching. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your night, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream.